Okay, let's get started with our regular meeting. Emily, Mrs. Hatfield, can you call the meeting to order, please?
Yes, Mr. King.
Here.
Mrs. Patrick.
Still here.
Mr. O'Brien.
Here.
Mrs. Wagner-Fiesel.
Here.
And Dr. Weiss.
Here.
Thank you.
Oh, for sure, that would have got a present.
And next we need to approve the agenda for this meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second. Any further discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Mrs. Patrick.
Yes.
Mr. King.
Yes.
Dr. Weiss.
Yes.
And Mrs. Wagner-Fiesel.
Yes.
Thank you.
And now we have our presentation for this evening, one of my favorite presenters because she and I dig into these numbers. Jeanette Kenny is going to talk to us about the fall third grade reading guarantee and the test results.
We do like our data, so. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on our third grade guarantee, our third grade testing data, as well as a couple other things that are going on in the data and testing world. So the update for the 2020-2021 school year is that the third grade guarantee is slightly different than it has been in the past. While the state still set a promotion score of 683 on Ohio State test or a 46 on the reading subscore, for this school year, no student can be retained solely based on a test score. So a student, even though they might not earn a promotion score, still could be promoted to the fourth grade as long as the reading teacher and principal believe that they're reading at the level appropriate to be promoted. So if we look at our data from this year, you've seen how our students did on the fall OST, but I also included here our third graders who were put on a RIMP or Reading Improvement Monitoring Plan, which is from the fall diagnostic, and we use Ames Web Plus for that data point. So you can see in the fall of 2020, we did have a slight increase of students who were put on a plan compared to 2019, but really not a dramatic increase at all. And then if we look at our fall OST data, we can see again, and you saw this in the memo that I had prepared, that we did see a slight dip in both our percentage of students who received proficient on the fall test. And it's important to remember that this is an end of third grade test that the students just have 2 opportunities to take. So these students took it in the fall, they will take it again in the spring and April. So we saw a slight decrease, about 11% who were proficient or better. We saw about a 7% decrease in our students who reached that promotion score on the fall test. I think the biggest thing to point out here is that typically we test close to 100% of our students in the fall. With the pandemic and with a chunk of our students who are doing committed distance learning, we did only test 74% of our third graders. So not having tested 26% of our third graders is going to have an impact on our data. All students were given the opportunity, but we do have the group of students who are doing committed distance learning who might not be comfortable coming in to a school building to test, and the test has to be given in person. So again, this was pretty similar to districts that we tend to collaborate with. We talked to Dublin and New Albany and Upper Arlington about their data, and everyone pretty much across the state was seeing the same thing, a slight dip. And often districts had a lot smaller percentage of their students testing than they have in the past. The other thing that we do and the way we approach the fall data, again, even though a student can't be retained because of a promotion score, we still take a look at every student who didn't meet that promotion score and put them on a plan to make sure that we're monitoring their progress throughout the school year so that we do have good data points at the end of the year if they haven't met promotion. To know where they are in their reading progress. So we continued that this year, and every student who, again, wasn't meeting that 683 promotion score was put on a plan in their building and have, a little bit extra progress monitoring to track their progress. As you can see up here, these are the dates. We're kind of entering that testing season coming up here very soon. So this is kind of the schedule of what we've got upcoming. Everything right now is scheduled to occur as planned. So testing hasn't been canceled. We're still moving forward with that. You can see our OELPA is for our English language learner students. We've got our alternate assessment. We've got the state administered ACT for juniors. On that day, we also have an opportunity for students who are trying to achieve the sealed by literacy. We offer testing for those seniors on that same day. And then we have Terra Nova in view for our 2nd, 3rd, and 6th graders, our spring Ohio State test starting April 5th, and then AP test those first 2 full weeks of May. So that's kind of what's upcoming for the rest of the school year with testing. Again, everything is right now scheduled to occur as it typically does in most years. Yeah.
Regarding the AP tests, if you're a CDL student, what is the mandatory requirement for that test?
So the College Board is still working through that.
Okay.
Currently, the plan is that those students would take it in person, but there is kind of a, so that's going to be kind of the default, is that those students would schedule to come into the building to take it, similar to our committed distance learning students for the Ohio State test. They have to come in and take it in person. If there's a medical reason or a specific reason that a student can't, College Board is developing another online opportunity for them that I believe doesn't happen until June.
Okay.
So there was an option for them if they can't come in.
And just for clarification, the federal government hasn't waived the state testing requirements. So it's not like we're doing this to be mean to our students. If there's a waiver, then the state legislature can act to give all school districts a waiver not to test, which was what was done this past spring. But as of right now, we have to follow what the law is.
Correct. And I think that's sometimes a misunderstanding is people assume Ohio can just make that decision, and
Right.
Ohio cannot. They are, most of the tests, I think 17 of the 21 are federally mandated. So yeah, we don't have a lot of control over that.
Okay, any other questions?
Sorry to hijack.
Oh, no, that's fine. And then one additional piece of data that we wanted to share with you is we recently got some reports from the National Student Clearinghouse. And one of the things that we like to take a look at, and especially with the kind of unusual end to our school year, is what our 2020 graduates did after they left high school. So of our class of 2020, we had 82% of those enroll in college immediately. It was a slight dip of about 2% from the prior year, but that tends to kind of fluctuate a little bit. Nationally, there was a dip of 22%. So our graduates, you know, we saw a high graduation rate and our kids still were moving on to college. So I think that's a very positive thing to point out and something that we'll continue to track their progress over the next few years to see what that looks like, you know, in their second year of college and how many actually are going to graduate within that 6 years that the National Student Clearinghouse reports on. Another interesting data piece that we like to look at are the top 5 schools that our students are attending, which tend to stay relatively similar but change a little bit. So Ohio State University was top, followed by Columbus State. Cincinnati moved up on our list a little bit. They were number 3. And then Ohio State Marion number 4 and Ohio University was 5. So again, that's coming from our class of 2020 graduates. And then a final piece of data that we kind of continue to look at as well is we had an interesting end to last school year, and the school year has looked slightly different as well, is how our students that are currently still enrolled here are performing. And so a kind of quick analysis that we did today actually was looking at what the average Q1 GPA for our high schoolers was in 2019, and then what the average Q1 GPA for our high schoolers in 2020. And what we found is that it was identical to the 10,000th place. So our average GPA was 3.57 in both years, which again is something that we'll continue to monitor, but is telling that our students are still performing very well, even in a hybrid or committed distance learning model when we're used to those 5 days in. So that was a positive data point for us to see today.
Very good.
And that's all I have. If there's any other questions.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, board president's report. I guess that's me. Well, I'd like to thank all the board members for entrusting me with this position. And I'd like to thank Mindy Patrick for leading us last year through the craziness that we had to go through. I really don't have an agenda, as I tell people all the time. I don't believe that people who serve in an elected position that have an agenda are doing the right thing, because the right thing is always to do what is best for the good of the whole. And in this district, it's to live the mission, which is to facilitate maximum learning for every student. I've always made all of my decisions since I've been on this board since 2006. I've always made my decisions based on what is good for the whole, not it's good for me or my kids or my husband, but what is good for the whole. So some issues I see us having to tackle this year, of course, are getting through the COVID pandemic, our academic achievement, state funding, and growth. You know, a lot of those things we tackle every year. COVID just is back again this year, and we hope to get rid of it soon. But I continue to serve as a school board member because my passion is public education, and it's fair funding for public education. I've educated myself about the ins and outs and the whys and the wheres when it comes to education funding in our state. And one report that I rely on all the time is from the Ohio Department of Education, and that's the district profile, otherwise known as the CUP report. It was created under the suggestion of now Speaker of the Ohio House, Bob Cupp. And every time I see him, I tell him I love his report. And he goes, okay, Olentangy, that's what he calls me, Olentangy. This report compares all 607 this year, Ohio public school districts in 61 different areas. And it provides information on everything from the ethnic makeup of our student body to the percentage and state funding formula that a district receives on a per pupil basis. The latest report, based on last year's data, was released over the holiday break. And the area that I always look at is the expenditure per pupil area. And once again, Olentangy spends less per pupil than the state and comparable district averages. We spend $11,875 per pupil. The state's average school district spends $12,681, and a similar district, which is a district that's kind of like us, but we're very unique, but they group us with kind of like us districts, they spend $12,703 per pupil. The highest is Orange School District, not Orange High School, but the Orange School District that spends over $24,000 per pupil. More than double of what we spend. So out of the 607 school districts in the state, we're 320 when it comes to education spending per pupil. Right in the middle. This includes salaries, building operations, instruction, pupil support, and staff support. I don't want to say we're average, but I want to say that we're very fiscally minded here on the Olentangy School Board. Now, I also looked at Central Ohio school districts. And when I mean Central Ohio, I look at all the Delaware County school districts, all of the school districts in Franklin County, and then I throw in Pickerington because it kind of straddles. And I also this year threw in Granville as well. So out of the 22 school districts in that area, Olentangy is number 16 when it comes to spending. So 16 out of 22. And when it comes to state funding, we're 21st lowest in Central Ohio. Upper Arlington beats us. So they get the least in Central Ohio. And state funding, out of all 607 school districts in the state, we're 591. And this year they did include some CARES Act funding in that. So we're 591 out of 607 school districts, down at the bottom. And although this information is based on last year's data, we do not have the highest school district taxes as some people believe. I get that all the time. We have the highest school district taxes in the state. No, we're number 7 in Central Ohio and 43rd in the state. Now, again, that includes last year's data. Mrs. Hatfield is collecting the current year tax data as this report doesn't include that. But anyone can run this report. It's on the Ohio Department of Education's website, and in the search bar, just put in CUP report or district profile, and it comes right up. Finally, I hope everyone will join me on Monday in participating in the One Community Conference which will look a little different this year. We're actually going to have like 6 different events held throughout the rest of the year. And on Monday, we are recognizing the service and celebrating the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So on Monday, the district will participate in a day of service, which is very appropriate. There are 5 different ways to participate, including donating healthy snacks for choices, to writing thank you cards for healthcare professionals, to collecting diapers and pajamas for Turning Point, which is the women's shelter here in Delaware County. More information is on the district's website. It pops right up as soon as you log on to the district's website. So I hope you will join me in participating in this day of service and looking at all of the events that we have coming up in our One Community Conference. And that's all I have tonight. Mr. Rafe, what do you have?
Well, that's hard to top, Mrs. Fiesel. That was a lot of information. So anyways, good evening. Thank you. As always, see if I can coordinate all this stuff, the mask and the clicker, and I don't need to now talk about that slide since Mrs. Fiesel has already filled you in on all the events of the One Community Conference. As she said, 6 events spanning January through May. There are 2 events in January. The first is the Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service, and then the second one is our virtual keynote and workshop with Elena Aguilera on January 30th. So I'm really proud of all the efforts that go into the One Community Conference, and I think now more than ever, we need events like this to bring us together as one community. So currently we do have kids all throughout the district who are participating in the day of service, and here we have a couple photos of kids preparing snack kids and creating cards for first responders. And as Mrs. Fiesel said, a lot of the agencies, LSS Choices, Domestic Abuse Shelter, Turning Point, the Delaware County Diaper Bank, and Mount Carmel healthcare workers will all be the recipients. So I'll take a moment to highlight the work of our communications department. The Ohio School Public Relations Association honored them with 5 awards for Best of the Best. The 2019 Quality Profile and Annual Report, Marks of Distinction for Public Relations, Marketing Plans, Social Media, and Focused Social Media Campaigns, and our dedicated Levy microsite. So Mrs. Davis and her team, I think, have just simply done an outstanding job. We've really seen great growth in that area and continue to see it. So congratulations to our communications team. They reached a pinnacle with all of those awards, and then they go and make a slide that includes a picture of me. So now they get demoted. But this was interesting. Honestly, I did not know this was going on. It was a surprise, but the Dispatch Media Group puts out a campaign every year for voting for top picks for all different types of things all throughout the greater Columbus area. And we were voted the best public school district by the Dispatch Media Group. So I'm very honored. It's one of those types of things where this is just an example of the community stepping up and honoring us, honoring the work we do. So I'm very, very thankful that the community members took time to step up and honor the district with that award. Now, we go to a third recognition. And as we just had our organizational meeting, I want to make sure I stop and take time, and I really think it's the community should take time to appreciate everything that Mrs. Patrick has done in the last 4 years. She has served in a leadership role on the board, 2 years as vice president, 2 years as president, and board leadership is all board service is important, but board leadership is twice the service because you have to attend twice the meetings because we have our weekly agenda prep meetings prior, so you get to spend twice as much time with us. Mindy, you came to the board or I guess we first got to meet each other through your passion for serving students with dyslexia. I think it's highly, highly appropriate that just this week the governor signed the dyslexia bill.
No, isn't it great?
So, I mean, that is your, your true passion that brought you to our board. But I can tell you, when I wake up in the morning at 4:30 and see a response to an email from some community member at 1:35 in the morning, I can tell everybody in the community that's evidence of how much you care and how much you took the job and your responsibility as in those board leadership positions seriously. We've had a lot of conversations over the years, and you use a lot of self-deprecating humor, but you are a great leader. And the support you've given our students and our staff the last years is highly, highly appreciated. Your message to the staff, I got a lot of great positive feedback on. So thank you. So with that, we've done in the past. Oh gosh, now I got to put on that mask again. Last time I only had 2 things, so I walk around like this a lot of times.
It's painful to watch, isn't it?
Isn't it?
But that is so kind.
We have a
Oh,
lifetime gavel
can I use
to
this on
display
children, my children?
and flowers. Thank you. Thank you.
This is beautiful.
I would like to instead change it over to the awards that the communications department and its school district got.
Yes.
It was a rough year and everybody worked like triple hard. So
Well,
you made my job easy.
that's what we try to do. So, thank you. I'm gonna flip to a sad note in the district. We lost a great community member here this week. Former Olentangy Superintendent Ralph Hall passed away at the age of 85. Ralph served as superintendent in the district from 1980 to 1988, when enrollment growth at the time was really just starting to take off. But we basically had 1,600 students for most of Mr. Hall's career. I've had a chance to meet him over the years. Was a huge basketball fan. I'd see him at basketball games, even just a few years ago. So it's a great man, and he'll be missed. So rest in peace, Mr. Hall. We are now at the phase of starting the process to name our elementary 16. So we will be opening a survey to the entire Olentangy community to submit suggestions for that elementary 16. You see the timeline there. We will be going through that process with Mrs. Janegi and Mrs. Davis. They'll start working. We'll have the selection at the February 11th board meeting, and then Ms. Janegi and Ms. Davis will work on the brand project, mascots and all those things. And then we'll culminate in March with the attendance boundaries, and the mascot and logo will all be in place, and we will be off and running. So with that, the things based on our email chatter of the day, probably something of great interest to the over 100 people who are currently watching the board meeting. As I said back in October, I would give an update on our attendance model at this meeting, heading back into our 2nd semester. So it was a long time. Obviously we had the attendance model that we announced on July 28th and went through all the way into October. So basically a whole quarter of school, and gave our update at that point. So I want to start by going back and just reviewing. Again, this is where we were back on July 28th. We had, obviously the statewide indicator system and the color-coded system, and this is, this was a big deal. for a long time. A lot of people waited with bated breath for the announcement of where we were going to be as a county on a weekly basis as the governor. And this has all kind of fallen by the wayside from the standpoint of the risk levels and the guidance and all those things. But our plan of our One Olentangy Back Together plan is based on that yellow system. We were going to be full in person, and the orange red we'd be in hybrid, and the purple. And as we said all along, we would not be totally tied to this. But I think it's important to come back to, as this was our starting point, and we said we were going to gather our local data, monitor our local data, and see what would happen once we got back into school and got together and and lived our lives and all those kind of things. So we carried that through to October and monitored our data and said, our driving question was, how do we maximize student learning while minimizing risks for our students and staff, and balancing all those things out? All of these factors, both of those factors were of equal importance to our decision, and that we were going to monitor all these types of data points. And again, we have those, and we're continuing to monitor all those kind of data points. So this graph that you're looking at shows we've had from October 22nd, when I last gave an update, to now January 14th to continue in that hybrid model. So on that graph are the positive students, positive staff, and then the total. The arrow point, which is week 8 in October, when I gave an update, is where we were. The star point is where we are now. And I see that the only thing that's happened, and our point of staying in the hybrid, was we were worried at that point with changing conditions, weather, everybody coming inside, flu season, all the different factors that were changing at that data point. We expected cases to go up, and that's exactly what happened. So that's where we are. Our CATS data, the COVID analytics tracking system that we currently are monitoring across the board, a big factor in that is the cases per 100,000. Now, again, when the governor made his color-coded system, the big thing was to be below 100 cases per 100,000 people, because that indicated a low incident of community spread. That's what got you into yellow. So currently, in Franklin County, and everybody thinks about, oh my gosh, everything's so horrible in Franklin County. Franklin County has 634 cases per 100,000 people. Delaware County has 848 cases per 100,000 people. And some of those are a factor of higher population and just raw, sheer numbers, but it's still based on 100,000 people. And here in Olentangy, we have the highest rate of those three at 946 cases per 100,000 people. So this notion that we think about, that we hear from some people that the virus isn't prevalent in our community, or we don't have community spread, or that in our district, this data indicates otherwise. So, again, this is concerning. It is concerning because all indication from the Ohio State data analytics team that's providing this data from us is that the numbers are going to continue to rise here in the near term, because we haven't seen we've made it through one incubation period we're past the incubation period for the Christmas holiday spread, but we're not past the incubation period for the New Year's kind of holiday spread. So there is still anticipated spread. And we're seeing that in the numbers that we're currently posting, that our numbers are trending up here again in the district. So I'm recommending, or I'm deciding, that we are going to continue to remain in our current hybrid attendance model and continue to monitor the cases. The vaccine rollout is a huge consideration for us. We put out to our staff that the opportunity to sign up to tell us whether or not they were willing to be vaccinated. And We had 88.4% of our staff respond positively that they're willing to be vaccinated. And the reason I say that number is because that's an indication to me is that if the staff is that willing to be vaccinated, they have a high level of concern about their safety in our buildings. And again, that has to be a major consideration for us as we continue to move forward. The next update I'm going to give is at February 11th. The governor has put out a target date of March 1st to have all districts back in person. They've prioritized vaccines for districts that are willing to get back in person. I have signed the governor's pledge, but that was an easy decision for me because we're back in person. Hybrid attendance model counts as an in-person model. So I think that a lot of that was directed. In his press conference today, he announced that 1/3 of the districts in the state are still full remote, 1/3 of the districts in the state are in hybrid, and 1/3 of the districts are in full-time. Again, the majority of schools that are in full-time are smaller districts and are able to manage the social distancing much better. There's been a lot of talk about the new contact tracing guidelines. Those aren't any different for us because how the governor recommended to do the contact tracing is exactly how we've been doing the contact tracing all year. If 2 students are in a classroom with masks, they weren't considered to be contacts. And again, most of our contacts are coming from, we do know they are still coming from out of school activities and sports activities and all those other activities, but the issue we will continue to have that we'll have to decide in February as we continue to look at this and move forward is our level of comfort with contact, because we still, because of the size of our schools, will not be able to have 6 feet of social distancing during our lunch periods when kids aren't wearing masks. So there is still a prevalent risk for contacts during those timeframes. That's where most of our contacts would come from if we decide to come back full time. We spent hours and hours and hours and hours debating this notion because again, we want to be back full time. I think by and large, the vast majority of our staff want that, but there is still a very high level of concern given the size of our schools. We have discussed the idea of possibly bringing different levels back in a staggered manner, but there's just a multitude of logistical considerations. And while I'm thankful for the people that email me with all of their suggestions and all of their comments about all of the data and what we believe or don't believe, we have all the information we need to make the decision we can moving forward. So I'll take any questions you might have on the attendance models and where we are and where we're going. You know, I'll jump ahead and just say, because a standard question is when and what will it take? And I'm just not willing to say, as some other districts have said, well, if it's 99 cases per whatever versus 100. I think the numbers are just too murky to say one thing one way or the other. And I don't know how, you know, I'll be more than happy to discuss that with anybody about it, but, you know, if we tie ourselves to an exact date or if we tie ourselves to an exact number, all we're going to be doing is pushing ourselves up against those things that will force what I consider maybe a bad decision or a decision that will have to change. The thing I continue to be the most proud of is that we're the largest district in the state that has been in school the entire time. Southwest City Schools, that is slightly large. Every district larger than us has either been full remote at some point, or Southwest City's been in a hybrid and they're larger than us, but they've been in and out of it. We haven't changed, and that has maintained, that stability I think is very, very important. Now I'll take any questions.
Questions?
Well, I mean, let's say one more thing.
I mean, it's probably more of just a comment. I mean, I think you're thinking about it the right way. You're using good judgment. I think the approach is very prudent, and I support continuing to go hybrid. It will just continue to update as conditions change.
You know, and honestly, part of the, and I appreciate that, Mr. O'Brien, but there may be a point where it doesn't, and we've been meeting with, you know, all of the association presidents who are collaborative and supportive and working with us, and we all have a point of time where we may just have to rip the Band-Aid off and say, this is, because we want to go in full time. We absolutely want to be in full time. And I still feel right now, at this moment, it's still, given where the cases are and where they're potentially going, too risky.
Mrs. Patrick?
Oh. On a professional level, I 100% agree. On a personal level, of course, I would like my child in school. So I think that hits back to Mrs. Fiesel's point about you have to make the best decision for the whole. We're an employer and an educator. So I appreciate that. I did have one question that I thought you might be privy to the answer of things that I've read about what the Board of Health is stating as far as contacts go. I read, and I was hoping you could verify, that you are not, if you've been in contact, you would still have to quarantine until you receive your second dose of the vaccine. Do you know the answer to that?
I don't know the answer to that, just because there's just right now that we are working very hard to get our people lined up. We're working with the health district to make sure we can get vaccines available. I'm working with some private healthcare providers to see if we can get, right now the biggest problem we're having is the availability of vaccine. Ohio's getting 100,000 vaccines a week. And if they divide it up by 88 counties, that's 1,200 per county. And that's pretty much what the county's getting. So only 100, the health district has told me they'd be able to immunize 6,000 people a week if they had the vaccines. They're ready, they've done it before, they know how to do it, they're ready. But we're allocating vaccines to private pharmacies and it's a very piecemeal approach that I really have concerns about, because I do think now Ohio State is starting vaccine clinics at the Schottenstein Center, and they're going to be vaccinating 5,000 people a day. So because we have a great partnership with Ohio State, I'm hopeful we're going to be able to somehow partner with them to get that. I mean, that would take care of all of our staff in half a day. So I'll find out the answer to the quarantine question.
Well, I just didn't know, and I believe, you know, only a portion of what I read. So I know that you're on calls with the Board of Health. Last night I had my board meeting for the Career Center. And one of the things that they were discussing was that when you do get the vaccine, there are several people that do have a reaction. And so they're trying to get priority for Fridays because it can create sick days. So, you know, yay, there's a vaccine, but it doesn't mean it's without complications. We could still have a staffing problem with substitutes because people are ill from getting the vaccine.
I don't say this, I'd be willing to give up a calamity day to get everybody vaccinated as fast as we. Again, I'm not making a public statement on, you know, because this is in my Central House Superintendent's meeting, and this is sad that the level of scrutiny that we're under is going to this level. Is that we debated, the superintendents were debating, so the vaccine's available, should I go out and get it first to be an example that I'm willing to get the vaccine because I think that's the best thing to do, or should I wait because I shouldn't be getting it first because I'm more important than somebody else who should be getting the vaccine personally. I'm like, you guys overthink stuff too much. I mean, but that's the people will have opinions about that because people have opinions about everything. And it's just, and again, I'm not making a public statement about should you get the vaccine or not get the vaccine. That is a personal, private decision. All we did was provide a list of names and email addresses so that the health district kind of one step out of the process. Now they have them. As soon as they have vaccines appointments available, they can email those people and say, appointments are available, sign up for your vaccine if you still want it.
Right, that is direct.
Right.
Right, it'll go right to the individual, not to us to
No.
manage.
So we have no idea who will be, and again, we're not going to be able to exclude people who don't want the vaccine or what. But I do think that is a very important piece to getting us back full-time in that, because that will raise the level of safety and security of our staff. And I get it. I mean, I get these emails out all the time that kids, the idea that kids don't get COVID. Well, right now, we 3 times as many kids with COVID as we do staff. Now, we do have more kids than we do staff, but kids do get it.
I'm on my 3rd quarantine with 1 positive test and more, kids get it.
Yeah.
Comment. I just wanted to say I concur with both Kevin and Mindy about their statements with what you're doing. And I like the idea that you close your presentation with the word stability. I've always felt very strongly that there's a good management here with that.
Keisha, did you have?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. One, with the vaccines, will that include the substitute teachers?
We are able to, they can go on the list from the ESCCO where they're employed. And then we also, like, if we have them for long-term subs and some other people, our pool subs.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
And that's what we encourage. If you're interested, if like your private healthcare provider provides it, go get it. And the health district just says, we don't care where we get it, just go get it, is what they're saying.
And just, I know we've gotten all the emails about the data, but I know that I've looked at, various datas and the research that's been out there, but, and I definitely want my kids back in school 5 days, please.
Coming from somebody who works from home.
Yes. But I just, and just looking at it, just kind of considering what our data is and comparing it to what we're seeing in the research, just kind of looking at that and considering that, how does that apply and can we apply that to what our school district is?
Mm-hmm.
So that's all. I want to.
As somebody in the field, I appreciate your perspective on it. And I know it is, and it's like when the governor got up and talked about this study and about the effects of kids quarantining and the different contact tracing and all this other things, that was great, but it wasn't a peer-reviewed study. And so I was on a call a week later, and people from Ohio State, which I think actually did the study, other people from Ohio State that were on the call were saying, I'd be real hesitant to follow the guidelines that are coming out of that. Well, what do you believe? I mean, the governor just said that. Really? So, Mrs. Feasel?
Yep. I did email our general health district because I wanted clarification on the guidance of the quarantine. Because as my husband being a basketball coach, he's had multiple players out on quarantine and coaches as well. He had to coach the freshman game the other night because our freshman coach was out. But the Mrs. Hiddleston from the health department emailed me back. She said the CDC did not change the guidance about the 6 feet. So we're currently able to offer that 6 feet of separation. So they haven't changed the 6 feet. They addressed the length and time of the quarantine. That was the change that was made. So I want to remind people, when we bring the students back, we can't guarantee the 6 feet of separation in every situation, particularly in our lunchrooms. And from the Ohio Department of Health, they state that if meals are consumed, a distance of at least 6 feet between students must be maintained. Now, in our high schools, I don't know how we can do that. Maybe in some of our elementaries, but probably middle and high school, I don't know that we can do 6 feet in the lunchroom. People have asked me, do you think we can come back? Yeah, I think we can come back. Can we stay back? I don't think we can stay back, going to your continuity remarks. I think we have stated since the beginning, our goal is always to return 5 days a week. But as a working mom, if I had to jump back and forth like some of these school districts have had to do, that is just horrendous. So we had to think about that as well, whether it's closing one school or the entire district because of an outbreak. And that's what you have to take into consideration as well. So I appreciate, I mean, the amount of time that has been spent on this, I don't even think we could add up all the hours between all of your staff. And no, we're not doing this because we like this. We're doing it because we feel that it's the best for our school district. And so that's why we're doing this. I mean, we just heard Ms. Kenny say that our high school GPA last year was 3.57, and this year, first semester, it's 3.57. So
And we'll get second quarter results here at the end of the week. You know, I live with a teacher and wants to be back. I hear it every day. When are we going back? When are we going back? Full time. Want to be full time. So I got to live it here at work and I got to live it here at home.
yeah.
And so, but, and again, there's different levels of comfort. And I just, you know, it's so interesting to, you know, and again, judge people's reaction. As you said, you've been in quarantine and, you know, or had, you know, like the motions that people go through of, oh my, what, I don't know if I, you know, how sick am I going to get? And, you know, I just read a study about, you know, that, or saw an article that people are saying the COVID lungs, post-COVID, are worse than smokers' lungs.
Well, in the heart issues, right?
Yeah.
Particularly for athletes, is can you pass the clean EKG after you test positive? So we've had, you know, 6 of the 12 varsity players tested positive. One of them took more than a month before she could get back and get a clean EKG.
So, you know, again, we can minimize, and I get a lot of comparisons to Big Walnut, and I'm happy Big Walnut is in full-time and they're having success, and that's great for them. But their high school has less students than Berkshire Middle School. With their capacity, you know, they've got 900 kids in there currently in their high school in a building with a capacity for 12 to 1,300. We still have 1,800 at Orange and Liberty and a capacity for 1,600. So, you know, I mean, we still have very, very large buildings that maintain that social distancing is going to be a challenge. And we're continuing to work through all of the logistical problems. And I just met with all the principals and said, we're coming. We better have all these things planned out of how we're going to do this if I decide to rip this Band-Aid off and go forward. But, you know, I think obviously the vaccine is going to be a factor for our staff. You know, and again, at the end of the day, if the staff crashes because they get exposed, quarantine cases, we won't be in school anyways. We'll be remote. And that's the last thing we want. So.
And I just hate to hear people say to make negative comments about the staff, because our staff is back full time.
Right. More than full time.
Right. I just want to emphasize that.
You couldn't hold that one back, Mr. Wright? Well,
our staff is back full time. So I don't want someone to send me a screenshot saying, did you see what so-and-so said about our staff?
Yeah. Well,
because just walk in their shoes.
It is, you know, again, it's a challenge for everybody. And again, for everybody who emails me and tells me a story of their child struggling, all I can ask you to do is continue to work with your teacher, continue to work with your school administrator, and we will do everything we can to try to help make things work in this model. I got a great email from Mr. Starner at Liberty High School who shared, and he was just sharing an email with me from a parent whose child was in crisis. Reached out to him, he mobilized the support team, the social worker, the school-based psychologist, and there were a lot of factors going into the child's struggle, and by many accounts, I would say, the parent was so appreciative of the team and their level of care and all the things that went into saving this kid's life. And now they've turned a corner and are doing well. And all that will happen. But we can't fix what we don't know about. So again, anybody whose child is struggling academically, socially, emotionally, we have to know so we can help. We have people ready. We have our mental health counselors are ready, willing, and able, and actively helping people all throughout the district. So, you know, I think we can continue down that path. And just, I'm sorry, but just sending everybody back 5 days isn't going to solve all those issues either.
Right.
I mean, everybody wants normalcy in the most abnormal situation any of us have ever lived through.
Mm-hmm.
So, any others? I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Fetty for a minute to give an update on our committed distance learning program. We did have this discussion at our previous board meeting about where we were. Dr. Fetty shared survey information. I'll keep talking or get out of the way. So
Good evening. So yes, in December, I shared with you what we were exploring as far as a permanent virtual school option and our timeline for making that decision so that we could open a school if we chose to effectively for the next school year, roughly following the same timeline for elementary 16 because a lot of work would go into that. Over the holiday break, we learned from the Department of Education that we will not be able to establish a virtual school at this time for next year because the department will not allow, state policy will not allow a traditional public school district to open a virtual school unless it's a community school, a charter school.
So if that's the case, if we opened our own charter school and our kids went there, we would have to pay them money?
Seemingly. But it would also be open to, the enrollment would be open wider than our district. So without our ability to do that, to create an actual virtual school with what's called an IRN, it's kind of like a social security number for a school. It's a foundation of everything we would need to do for testing, assigning staff, assigning students. If the state will not allow us to do that, our only option would be to create a program in the way that, say, OASIS is a program. The challenge there is that that's what we're doing this year, and we've learned of all of the ways that that's not a sustainable option. If students and staff cannot belong to the school in which they're assigned, that's just not sustainable. There would be significant cost implications and state reporting implications, state testing implications. So at this time, because of the state policy restriction and the cost and sustainability issues of the alternatives, we are going to move forward at this time, not planning to open a virtual school next year. Holding out hope that the state will evolve with their policy and will always reevaluate when that, if and when that happens. But we just feel that if we were going to open a virtual school as much as we want to, we need certain things to be in place to do it successfully and to meet the expectations of our community. And without that IRN, we don't feel we can do that.
So does that have to be done legislatively?
That's what was indicated, yes. We're still kind of in the process of trying to get a greater understanding from ODE. We're not the only district in this boat. This is a statewide issue.
Right.
All the districts, many districts that are doing a virtual program this year have data like we had with the interest in a possible virtual school. So we're not alone in this, but we don't have all of the final answers yet. But I know there were some people, many people waiting to hear the resolution of our research. And as I explained the timeline last time, that's where it leaves us at this point.
Basically, we'd have to become our own community school.
Yes.
And then we'd have to open it up statewide, which just creates a whole nother barrel of monkeys to deal with. And I'm not saying that the kids are, it's like a barrel of problems that you have to deal with when that happens.
And throughout the process, we'll have a greater understanding of what that would mean for us, but that was not the parameters we were expecting.
Yeah. So so much for ingenuity and supporting new ideas in education.
And Mrs. Fiesel, I didn't think anything of your comment about I love that game, the Barrel of Monkeys. It was
I did too. I had tons of
I
them.
think 35 was my record monkey.
Yeah.
It's a long day. Ending it on a barrel of monkeys. What? So here's a highlight of our action items. The task order with CT Consultants is for that design bidding for the bus lanes at Hyatt's Middle School. Anybody out there in the world who has ever had to pick up or drop off a child at Hyatt's Middle School understands the difficulty. Our bus drivers struggle with this considerably getting in and out of that building. So we are going to be putting in a bus-only lane, kind of a fast pass lane for the buses to get in and out, and then expanding the parking lot. The facility rental pricing, as I indicated to you, is unchanged, as is the contract with the OIAA. We're very appreciative of that partnership. We had previously purchased a chiller for Scioto Ridge Elementary School, and now this is the contract for the installation, and then it's time of the year. We know it's the first of the year because we're buying 11 new buses for next year. So, and there's our important dates. Next board meeting is the 27th, so. Any questions? Sorry to take so long.
Yeah.
We paused that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Rafe. Mrs. Hatfield, your treasurer's report, please.
Calling Mrs. Ray?
It sounded
Oh,
like it, but she
did I
did.
say Mrs. Rafe? I meant Mr. Rafe.
I'll tell Katie said it.
Yeah, I evaluate.
If we actually like.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, well, good evening. I have a much shorter presentation for you all this evening, so I'm sure this will go over well. But we do have some good news to share. What I want to highlight this evening is our tax rates for tax year 2020. I apologize, that looks much smaller on the screen than in print, so I will make note of that for next time when I bring the rates forward to not include quite as much background. But just a reminder for our community, the tax year 2020 bills are collected in calendar year 2021. That actually cross 2 fiscal years when we're talking about reporting in the 5-year forecast. So we will have the first half collections in January, February, March, which is this fiscal year. And then July, August, September, we will collect the second half, which posts to fiscal year 2022. As you can see by the chart, we are now at a voted or gross collection rate of 92.2 mils. However, I really want to highlight the effective rate for class 1. So the effective rate for class 1 is 56.886 mils. Class 1 is our residential class. That is what our homeowners are paying in the community. So that effective rate has rolled back from the 92.2 to 56.8. The cost per $100,000 property valuation is $1,798.19. And so we have some variances that I want to walk through quickly and just kind of reiterate how this happens. When we take a look at why we have a different voted millage versus effective millage, this is what happens, or the effect of House Bill 920. House Bill 920 was passed in 1976. It is a piece of legislation that says, essentially, once you put an item on the ballot at a voted rate, that vote cannot collect more than the amount that it was approved for at that time. So it takes the voted rate and rolls it back and creates this effective rate to ensure that our taxpayers do not get hyperinflation on their tax bills. Now, we do get growth from our inside 5 mils, but we do not get that inflationary growth on anything above those 5 mils. So the good news for our taxpayers is they were actually, if you'll note on the 2020 millage rates, we actually rolled back the levy that we just passed in 2020. So valuations in the community went up overall about 12%, which we thought was coming. We're just slightly under 12% community-wide in our final results. So with that growth, it rolled back the effective millage rate. Some folks may still see an increase in their bill, but that's probably due to their valuation increases, not just the millage that was passed at the 2020 levy campaign. And in fact, we're collecting less per $100,000 because of the valuation increase than we had previously thought. We thought the new valuation would collect about $276.50 per $100,000 valuation. Our overall growth, if you look at the previous chart, is only about $133. So good news overall. And we'll have more information about tax rates and what's going on with our compatriots in our other school districts in the area. But right now, I just wanted to share where we are as a school district, and we'll have more information either at the next board meeting or the first meeting in February to share. Are there any questions I can answer for you about the tax rates and collections?
Thank you. Well, if I do the math right, is that, we voted on 7.9, but we're really at like 7.17 something?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was immediately rolled back.
Which is why people keep saying, why are school districts always on the ballot?
Right.
Because you're never collecting the full amount.
Correct. And with House Bill 920, I mean, it's good for the community in that they don't get those unvoted inflationary increases, but that's also why we constantly come back to talk to them about that. And the other factor for Olentangy, and we continue to reiterate this every time we have a forecast presentation, but we are a locally funded community. Our schools only get about 5 to 6% of our revenue from the state of Ohio. And so we have to continuously come back to our voters between that and House Bill 920 to ask for new millage to help support the growth and the operations and the services that they're getting currently and beyond as we continue to grow. So it's a continuing challenge for sure.
So just one quick question. If you look at the effective rate between class 1 and class 2, it's fairly tight up until about 2017. Then it starts to kind of spread. What happens between class 1 and class 2 to create that spread?
So it's the valuation differences. So as we grow and get more commercial property valuations don't necessarily grow as quickly as residential, meaning we might have a big boom of homes, but not very many commercial properties coming in to make the overall valuation in the community change that much. So as that grows faster or gets more, then we might see the spreads kind of differ more.
Could also be things coming off of TIFs.
I don't think.
If they come off of TIFs, then
Like
they are
to-
adding the
This
value
affects
back
our-
to the real property
Well, that
valuation.
affects the collection, but not necessarily the effective rate. That's it.
Which if you get a subsidized rate and then you come off the TIF, now you're paying full. Would that, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It will cause it to fluctuate as more come on and off. I think, you know, part of what we're seeing in valuations too with the economics that are currently in place is we're getting more board of revision cases where businesses are starting to say their valuation is lower. So if their valuation is lower, the effective millage rate on the commercial doesn't go down as quickly. So that's playing into this as well.
Okay.
Any other questions I can answer for you? Mrs. Patrick, I see you with your calculator. Are you doing okay?
Yeah. Well, I just seeing if I wrote down the right answer. I figured out how you got it.
Okay.
I'm good.
Great. And one more point that I will reiterate, and then is to show we have on the treasurer's webpage for the district a property tax 101 tab that walks through the different implications of House Bill 920, how effective rates are calculated, what does that mean to you as a taxpayer, and then shows our current tax rates for 2020. Those have been updated there. And there's also a scenario where it just kind of walks you through, if my property is worth $350,000, how do I figure my tax bill? How do I walk back into that amount? So we just wanted to post the website and remind folks that that's a tool that is there for them. And they're always, we're always happy to take questions. If they want to give me a call or my email is posted, they're welcome to contact me and we'll answer any questions that they might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh gosh, now I've messed up all my papers. Public participation. Ms. Davis, are you ready? Timer, are you ready?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, if you want to.
Okay, we have 30
welcome
minutes total for which we read public participation. And since people can't be here in the public, we have Mrs. Davis print them off and read them to us out loud. Each person that submitted has 5 minutes. So if it's a lengthy email, Mrs. Davis will read really fast, but she may not get all of the email in. So 30 minutes as a whole, 5 minutes per individual. Are you ready?
Yep, fast reading is my specialty, but I think we're gonna be okay.
All right, let's
All right.
go.
The first public participation is from Jeff Martin, 1606 Cottonwood Drive, Lewis Center. He writes, "Our students need full-time school." That's all.
Okay.
The second one is from Maureen Botis, 4737 Cybele Court, Powell, Ohio, 43065. "I would like to show my support for sending our children back to school full-time starting immediately. Studies show that children are not spreading the virus in schools even where 6 feet social distancing can't occur. It is in the best interest of our children and our community to have our children in school 5 full days." The third public participation is from Sarah Seppi, 7578 Hill Gale Court, Lewis Center, Ohio, 43035. However, there was no content in the rest of the submission, but I want to just note that for the record. Next is Scott Whetstone, 599 Village Park Drive. "Please let our kids go back to school 5 days a week. My son has an IEP and already has enough struggles when it comes to school and learning. The at-home learning just is not working. We have tried to be patient. We have tried different methods. We have tried hiring a tutor, and none of this is working. He is falling farther and farther behind the longer this hybrid approach goes on. He needs to be in school with his friends and classmates. The mental toll this is taking on our youth is immeasurable. We have seen studies where the virus doesn't spread in schools, and with some kids still electing to do CDL, it will make it a little easier to social distance. If parents aren't comfortable with sending their kids to school, then they can elect to do CDL, but please don't penalize the kids who need to be in school 5 days a week. A major reason we moved to this district was for the schools. A big reason why I'm comfortable with my son going back full time is because of how much I trust OLSD, and I know that they will do everything in their power to make sure our kids are healthy and safe. These kids are young and for the most part very healthy and resilient, but the mental health is quickly going down the tubes. This virus isn't going anywhere anytime soon. If we're waiting for everyone to get vaccinated, we're going to be waiting for years, and we obviously cannot afford to do that. The sooner we can get back to full time, the sooner these kids can get back to some sort of normalcy, which is what they all deserve. Lastly, I want to say thank you to everyone who continues to do everything they can to get our kids back to 5 days a week. It certainly does not go unnoticed." The next submission is from Lisa Knapp, 228 Hideaway Court, Powell. "I'd like to express my strong support for parents to be able to choose between virtual or 5-day-a-week in-person school. While online learning may work well for some, it just doesn't work for many, including my own son and others who are struggling. Most parents aren't capable of teaching their high school, middle school children the complex classes Olentangy offers, especially AP honors. AP and honors. School was shut down so officials could determine whether school was safe. Given the science and data we have now, I see no logical reason why OLSD cannot reopen. Our teachers are exceptional. They treat each child as an individual, helping them surpass various struggles they may encounter, and as a result, many Olentangy kids are successful after graduation, including my 2 oldest sons. Sadly, the quality and personalized attention many kids need just isn't there like it used to be, through no fault of the teachers, of course, and they are behind. Teachers are overloaded with teaching 2 classes and unable to provide much individual assistance. Studies show that young people are experiencing feelings of hopelessness and suicidal thoughts at record numbers due to being isolated. 10 months or years is neither reasonable or healthy. The data shows that improper education is more hazardous to kids than the virus. They are missing out so much in their lives right now, and important rites of passage are being lost forever. They are not okay, and neither are their parents. Delaware County Health is no longer requiring contacts of positive students and staff to quarantine, as long as all parties were masked and the contact occurred at school. Studies across the world and Ohio show that the virus isn't being transmitted by contacts within schools or even from kids to adults. It's being spread at home via gatherings, and this was stated by our governor. Several districts have successfully conducted full-time school all year, including Mason City Schools. High school has 3,500 students. Risk per ODH, 93% of Ohio's COVID fatalities are aged 60 and over, while 87% are aged 65 and over. 0 school-age children have died in Ohio of COVID-19 and comprise just 2% of all hospitalizations. Olentangy's demographics primarily do not fall into any of these categories. School is the safest place for our students and staff to be. The governor has set March 1st as a date he would like to see schools in person and has offered the vaccine to teachers and staff at schools who agree to open, with vaccinations set to begin next week. I'm curious as to how Olentangy responded. I hope that our teachers are permitted to choose to get the vaccine if that makes them feel safer. However, these dates often appear to be stall tactics. First was flatten the curve, then wear the mask, then follow the colored map, then reduce the hospitalizations, etc. Now it's eradicate the virus. That's impossible, and even the vaccine manufacturers have stated the virus will be with us forever. The goalposts have changed dozens of times and will continue to for years if action isn't taken. If it's true, rumor, that OLSD won't open until, quote, 75% of the population has been vaccinated, end quote, that's unattainable anytime soon. Studies haven't been done on kids to show they are safe, and that could take another year. What if it's found to not be safe? Vaccines aren't 100% effective. The flu shot was just 30% effective last season, and it takes years to establish herd immunity. There's no way to test a person's immunity. Question, what are the benchmarks that need to be achieved in order for Olentangy to resume school 5 days a week in person? Our governor clearly has no plan, but our schools should. Full-time school is a step back to normalcy and achievement for our kids, and a step ahead to our kids' mental and physical health and their futures. If not now, when? 6 months, a year. We cannot remain in this holding pattern much longer. I hope OLSD will step up and be trailblazers in getting our children back to school. Thank you for your consideration. Lisa Knapp. And then finally, Blazin Archibald, 161 Charterhouse Court, Powell, Ohio, 43065. The last letter we received from the school board concerning the prospect of going back to full-time made no commitments or timelines and suggested that hybrid learning is working and has been a success. I encourage the school board to recognize and acknowledge that hybrid learning is not working and has not been a success in terms of education. A simple comparison of grades this school year versus prior years would provide ample evidence. If the only metric that matters is number of cases spread at school, then what are the thresholds to a return to full-time, and are those metrics realistic? OLSD parents want their kids attending school full-time. Let us as parents share the risk of returning to full-time in-person school so we can do what's right for our kids. Those who are still concerned can use the online option. Please prioritize a return to full-time learning. Waiting till there are no cases or all have been vaccinated is not acceptable. Other districts and states have returned to full-time successfully, and I have full confidence that OLSD can do the same. You have our support for full-time in person. Be bold. And that is all.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment. We got some, I think 12 or 13 emails today. That's great, but I work during the day and so does everybody else. So if you send them to us on the day of a school board meeting, don't expect a response right away because we are all busy doing our jobs. And then secondly, one thing that I think we addressed everything in those comments that were read, except for one thing, Mr. Fetty, I just want to verify something with you that you said at the last board meeting was that the CDL program is full. Is that correct? You can't switch into CDL because we have our maximum number, over 5,300 students that are in CDL. So I just want to make that clear. People think that you can opt into it. Unfortunately, because it was so popular, you cannot. So.
Well, when we started the school year, we gave people two choices, in-person learning or CDL.
Mm-hmm.
And they made a semester-long commitment for CDL. They had the opportunity to come back afterwards. But once that school year started, there was so the notion that people can choose between 5 days of in-person and all online, that was gone July 28th or whenever, August 14th or whatever that deadline was back then.
Yep, just wanted to clarify that. All right, next up, we have some board action items, and I believe that are we gonna have anyone do any presentation on the board action item or not?
Oh, that was an oversight in my, Todd, why don't you talk about, because I meant to have you talk about that in my superintendent's report and I omitted that slide.
Okay, good evening. So back in April, a law was passed through the Families First Corona Response Act that gave emergency sick leave to employees. So essentially for COVID-related reasons, employees were given 10 additional emergency sick leave days. That law expired December 31st of 2020. So we were discussing prior to the law going away December 31st, and Mr. Rafe had asked me to take a look at what we might be able to do for our employees moving forward after the expiration of that law. So in collaboration with association leadership, we worked out through MOUs with our 4 associations in a resolution that would cover non-union classified and administrators to offer to sort of mirror the 10-day emergency leave from FFCRA if an individual has not used it previously and for quarantine purposes only. So we worked into the language, and again, this is a collaborative effort with our associations to work through this language for quarantine purposes only moving forward. And we do have an expiration date of March 27th, which is just before spring break, and then we can revisit it at that time to see if we need to extend it for 4th quarter. So just a few stipulations. We looked at, again, the given 2-week equivalent, 10 days for salaried employees or 80 hours for hourly employees, so 2 weeks. We have some hourly employees who don't work 80 hours, so it's still 2 weeks. So if they work less than 80 hours within the 2 weeks, it's still capped at the 2 weeks. And then we also mirrored the capped amount that was in the federal legislation back in the fall at $511 daily. We do have some individuals that make more than $511 daily. So in that case, they would have to decide, do I want to use my own sick leave or do I want to take the partial amount? Also, and this through discussion, we said that individual would have to be contact traced by local health department and while working within the scope of the Board of Education. So that's another provision stipulation in here. So again, this is a benefit I think that we're offering to our employees as we continue to work through the pandemic that gives them some benefit moving here through the 3rd quarter.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Meyer? It's the new policy due to COVID. Okay, do I have a motion to pass this new policy that Mr. Meyer just updated us on?
I'll move.
Do I have a second? Any further discussion? Mrs. Hatfield, call the roll, please.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mrs. Patrick,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Dr. Weiss,
Yes.
and Mrs. Wagner Fiesel.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Rafe, can you present your superintendent action items?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to present superintendent action items A through I for approval.
Do I have a motion?
Move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Patrick,
Yes.
Dr. Weiss,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
and Mrs. Wagner Fiesel.
Yes.
Thank
Now
you.
I just need motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Do I have a second? Just remember, there's no school coming up for all of those who that impacts. That's tomorrow and Monday for Martin Luther King holiday on Monday. Call the roll,
DACC
please.
tomorrow.
What?
There's DACC tomorrow.
Oh,
There's no school
sorry.
tomorrow?
Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Patrick,
Workday.
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.